Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We cannot believe it is 2022. It seems like it's unbelievable. I actually wrote 2012 on a check yesterday, so I'm in denial. But here we go. Here we are. We're in 2022, and we are here with you for the first Lunch and Learn of the year. And we could not be more excited. We have a very, very special program for you today. We have a wonderful author to speak for you today and a wonderful librarian. So we are going to stay very tight on our schedule today. So I'm not going to talk any longer because I have lots of questions I want to ask the author if I have time later. So I'm just going to pass it over to my wonderful colleague, Miriam. She's going to introduce our great librarian, and I will see you all in a little bit. But again, thank you as always. Put all of your questions in the chat box. And one other reminder is that any of the information covered here today will be sent out to you in the wrap up at the end with all the links and all the important information so you can just enjoy yourself and not have to worry about writing anything down during the program. And again, if you have any questions, put them in the chat or the Q&A. All right, enjoy the program. Thanks for joining us. And over to you, Miriam.
Thank you, Kelly, and hello, everyone. Welcome. As you know, this Library Lunch and Learn series features guest authors, editors, and librarians, and it aims to introduce you to some illuminating and informative books, as well as highlight the important work of readers' advisors, reference collection development, and programming librarians. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our first distinguished guest speaker from Fulton County Library Systems, Victor E. Simmons Jr. Victor is the library administrator for Fulton County Library Systems Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American Culture and History. He holds a master's degree in Library and Information Science from the City University of New York's Queens College and a Master's of Fine Arts degree from the City of New York's City College. Victor also recently gained certification as a certified public manager through the University of Georgia's Carl Vinson Institute of Government. Hailing from New York City, Victor spent over 20 years holding various titles within the New York Public Library System. And an active member of the Black Caucus of the American Library Association, he currently serves on the Marketing and Public Relations Committee. Today, Victor will be taking us on a behind-the-scenes virtual tour of the Auburn Research Library and be speaking about its history, mission, special holdings, and services. Welcome, Victor.
Thank you, Miriam, for having me. It is a pleasure to be here today. So, we're going to talk about Auburn today. As Miriam stated, my name is Victor Simmons Jr. I am the library administrator at the Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American Culture and History. We are a special library of the Fulton County Library System. The Fulton County Library System was once called the Atlanta Fulton Public Library System, and like all things, we changed our names in the last couple of years. Our next slide. Our mission at Auburn Avenue Research Library is to promote specialized library service, archival resources, and culturally and educationally related activities essential for study and use by general public, students, and scholars of the culture and history of people of African descent. Next slide. Our space is located in the downtown Atlanta area. We are on the corner of Cortlandt Street and Auburn Avenue at 101 Auburn Avenue. We have been at that current location since 1994. In 2008, the Fulton County residents voted to support the library with a bond referendum to renovate all of our libraries in the neighborhoods as well as Auburn Avenue. And so in 2014, the building closed down for a full renovation. The entire building was gutted and started from scratch. We reopened in 2016. That's when I came into the picture as the administrator. 2,800 square feet were added onto the building for a grand total of 56,000 square feet. That renovation cost $14.3 million to do. The building itself, all of our programming spaces have been pushed down to the first floor. If anyone had ever been to the Auburn Avenue Research Library before the renovation, our auditorium was located on the fourth floor. As you can see from the slide, we do anywhere between 350 to 400 programs annually. This is, of course, before COVID, in our space. So on our first floor, there is, of course, our auditorium, which seats a little less than 300 people. We have 3 cameras in that space that will record and stream anything that we do within that space. We also have a children's gallery, which we actually host children's illustrators, African-American children's illustrators. In the past, we've had exhibitions by Ashley Bryan, Brian Collier, R. Gregory Christie, and as of right now, we have Frank Morrison in our gallery space. We also have a large gallery space, excuse me. It's called the Kerry Mcfeeders Gallery. We do plenty of exhibitions in that area. You can go to the next slide. That is the gallery on the top. We do things from, we've had art exhibitions from local artists in the Atlanta area, which is a huge thing because the African-American art scene in Atlanta is booming. So we do plenty of art exhibitions. We do a lot of educational exhibitions, such as the Black Money exhibition, in which we worked with a GSU professor, Georgia State University professor, Harcourt Fuller, which focused on people of African descent on money. We also did a solo philanthropy exhibition, which was a traveling exhibition that focused on African-American philanthropists. The group that was responsible for bringing it in actually funded creating an Atlanta portion of that exhibition. So it was really an important thing to see a lot of local faces that were really big in philanthropy in Atlanta represented in that exhibition. We also have worked, as you can see, with the A3C Music Festival, which is a hip hop festival, and we actually host their Action Summit in our space. So we've had some of the top rappers and singers. So we've had Master P in our space and CeeLo Green, Dallas Austin, just to name a few. Next slide. So when you come into the building so before I even get to the second floor, let me continue with the first floor. On the first floor, we also have a Heritage Education Center, which is our classroom setting. So when classes come in, sometimes the librarian staff will do presentations in there. Other times it'll get used by the professors. When they come upstairs, they'll use our archives, they'll use our reference, and then they'll go back down to the Heritage Education Center and do their class, the remainder of their class. Then where we do our smaller programs is called the Authors and Writers Lounge. So anything between 50 to 60 people, we tend to do it in the Authors and Writers Lounge. In that very same space, we have EJIs, soil samples from locations around Fulton County in which individuals who had been lynched in Fulton County are now, their soil is stored in a jar to honor them for, them losing their lives for something so senseless. So when you go into the building, you make it to the second floor, that is where you're going to find our reference collection. As you enter the reference room, as you can see from the photo, you cannot actually browse our collection. It is all behind that glass wall, and behind those walls, that was a security issue because we had seen so much loss over the years of materials and got to the point where a lot of our material is the only copy of said book throughout the entire system. So we wanted to make sure that we protected the collection that is over 88 years old and not lose any more items than we needed to lose. So as you come in, we have four study rooms, I'm sorry, and that's both on the second and the third floor, that are general study rooms, and then there's 2 audio and video listening screening rooms. As you can see in one of the pictures, you catch one of the study rooms. And with that room, we can actually play DVDs, CDs, records, and we'll place them in the machine at our desk, and individuals can go into those rooms, but can control what they're watching. So they can pause, they can fast forward, they can do whatever, and listen to whatever they're listening to with headphones. Next slide. The Auburn Avenue Research Library gets its collection from the Auburn Avenue branch, which was located not too far away from where our current building is looked at. It was opened in 1921 after years of fighting for money that was given to the county by Carnegie, whichever one you want to call it, for an African-American library. And in 1921, that library opened. The Atlanta Public Library System at the time was not it wasn't desegregated until 1959. So for many years, there were African American specific libraries throughout the system. Auburn Avenue just happened to be the first. Next slide. Alice Duggan Carey was the very first librarian of the Auburn Avenue Library. She wasn't a professionally trained librarian, she was an educator, but she was an exceptional mentor and teacher to future librarians who walked into that building. Her history, even accomplishments, she is the second head of Morris Brown College's education department and also helped establish the second ever branch of the Zeta Phi Beta sorority. So while she wasn't the initial individual to start our collection, she was an important figure for African Americans, especially within the libraries in Georgia and in Atlanta specifically. Next slide. Now, Annie L Mcfeeters was the very first professional librarian for the system. But when she got her start in the system in 1934, she had not received her master's in library science at that point, but found the need, as we all do in libraries, the difficulties of getting some people to come into buildings. She found that if she created a collection that was catering to her users, that she could actually increase the attendance to her space. And she created a Negro history collection, which was later renamed the Samuel W. Williams collection. Annie Mcfeeters, for me, is very similar to me as Charlemagne Rollins in Chicago, or Augusta Baker or Pura Belpre in New York Public Library, that she was that influential to have the foresight to create a collection that we still have in our building to this day. And she also has the honor of being the very first African-American librarian to work at Georgia State College, which is now Georgia State University. Next slide. So our reference division. So as I stated, when you come up to the second floor, the collection is non-browsable, which means that you have to, we rely heavily on our reference interviews, and we pull, the staff goes behind the scenes, pulls those items and makes them available for the public. Now, that does not mean, I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep my cat away. That does not mean that, you know, we have the ability to store those items for individuals who are studying. We can hold study rooms for people if they are going to constantly come back, at least for a week or two. We will hold those items for them. The staff has been amazing at finding and getting people the things that they need. We get a lot of reference questions, not only from individuals walking in, but from individuals all over the world. Next slide. So the Samuel W. Williams collection, it was named after Samuel W. Williams. He was a civil rights leader in Atlanta. He was also the pastor of Friendship Baptist Church here in Atlanta. And he was a co-founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. I know it says council, but that was on me. The SCLC, which first president of SCLC, of course, was Dr. Martin Luther King. Next slide. In our programming division, so with Auburn Avenue Research Library, we made it our business to increase the amount of programs that we do, because we realized as a public research library that we would be closing off that building to so many people in the city who were interested in learning about the African American culture, but were not necessarily doing research or scholars in the schools. So we started to really push our programming to give them a taste of not only what they would have seen at a lecture in a college, but also programs that are sometimes just for the fun of it. So we would do things, next slide, like film screenings and lectures and musical performances. What you're seeing in the photo is Giwayin Mata, which is an all-woman drum group and dance troupe who perform at our Kwanzaa program every year. And we bring them every year because we get hundreds and hundreds of individuals who want to come and see it again and again because they are that amazing of performers. We've had plenty of authors and who have come through our building, panel discussions about all topics that we can. Just an example of some of the things that we've done. To be as open as possible as we can to our community, we've done programs on birthing in the doulas, and we would bring in actual doulas, but also bring in historians and lecturers to support that with that academic field to it, so that we're really appealing to the entire city and county of Fulton. Next slide. with our archives division. So our archives division, the footprint of that is pretty much exactly the same as the reference collections footprint. They have the same number of study rooms, the same kind of audiovisual study room, but in that space, we have an amazing amount of collections. Considering we are a public library with not a ton of funding, we happen to have some amazing collections. Next slide. So some of the notable collections are the Andrew Young papers. As you can see Andrew Young in the photo. If you look closely, not the person directly in front of him, but the person right after him is Congressman John Lewis. We have his papers and they are massive. We are currently in the process of trying to get those papers digitized with the help of Georgia Public Library System. We have Donna Lee Hollowell's collection, and Donna Lee Hollowell was a lawyer who is known for bailing Dr. King out of prison and getting him out of prison, but also known for the desegregation of UGA and of the school systems within Georgia. We have Hosea Williams's papers and photographs, and Hosea Williams was a part of Dr. King's inner circle. He was also a pastor himself. He hosted his own television show for many years, and many people today in the Atlanta area know the name of Hosea as Hosea Feeds the Hungry. He started the program to feed individuals who are not just homeless, but people who simply needed a meal. It is currently run now by his daughter, Elizabeth Omalami, and every Thanksgiving and Christmas, they feed so many people in the city. It is really an amazing program and an honor to even have been in the same circles as Sister Omalami. Recently, we have a funeral program that was digitized in connection with the Metro Atlanta Genealogical Society and Georgia Public Libraries. And so we've digitized our funeral programs. And so now they're all available to everyone, including everyone here, on the Digital Library of Georgia. And so that was a beautiful thing for anyone who is a genealogist. We wanted to be able to make that available so that everyone could get that information. As we all know, funeral programs tend to have bits and pieces of information that you're never going to find in a census. So we were very proud to be able to have those things digitized. Next slide. So we have a huge art collection in that space as well. One of them is Mary Park Washington's collection, as you're seeing one of her pieces that we have in our collection. In the photo there, we have a bunch of children's book illustrations. Like I stated earlier, ranging from Ashley Bryant to R. Gregory Christie. We have R. Gregory Christie's Congo Square paintings. We have Brian Collier's Muhammad Ali paintings. And so, you know, we try to continue to build those relationships with children's illustrators to bring in more pieces into our collection to really add to that and make it an even more robust collection. We have a Romare Bearden painting, which is always hanging in there and always nice to look at. Every once in a while, we bring it out for an exhibition. We have James Van Der Zee framed photos as well. And if you ever enter into our archive space, you will see the Ed Dwight Dirt Farmer sculpture, which is a beautiful sculpture, and it greets you as you walk into our space. Next slide. So that is not the end. I wanted to talk about how we make things happen at the Auburn Avenue Research Library. And so at Auburn, what we've done, and since I've been there, when I first got there, the divisions were very divided. And so we made it our business to bring down those walls, make them a little more blurrier. And so individuals within our archives work with the reference and work on the reference desk. Individuals in programming help process materials in the reference and in the archives. So we've kind of made it so that the team is well versed in everything, because my goal is to create a team that if they were to go anywhere else outside of the system or to apply for a position within the system, that they'd be able to add all of these different skills that they would not have had if we continued that divisional divide. So that is pretty much how we do what we do at Auburn. I appreciate all of you being here today to listen. I hope I did not run through that too fast. As I told Miriam earlier, I am an introvert and I am nervous no matter what. But thank you all, and thank you to Miriam and Kelly, and thank you to Penguin Random House for having me here today.
Thank you for your generous hospitality, Victor, and providing us with this very intimate and informative tour. We're deeply appreciative of the Auburn Research Library, its mission, its community-centered programs and services, its notable collections, and certainly its dedicated staff. And we encourage all of today's attendees to visit the library, even if virtually, refer patrons to its unique virtual services, and consider attending some of the lecture series and cultural programs. I understand that today there's actually one that folks can visit live, conversations with beloved and kindred, engaging the lived Black experience via speculative fiction. So please check it out. And thank you again, Victor.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for
Victor.
having me.
We
Thank
can't
you.
wait to visit. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we are so excited to introduce to you Daniel Pink, The Power of Regret, How Looking Backward Moves Us Forward. Daniel Pink's books, oh, excuse me, just for 1 second. Of course, there's always a little bit of, hold on, sorry. There's always a little bit of technical stuff I have to do. Hold on a minute. Sorry, Daniel. I'm coming. Okay, sorry. All right, sorry about that. Let me just quickly introduce you. Daniel Pink's books have helped readers and organizations around the world rethink how they live and operate. He is the author of the New York Times bestsellers A Whole New Mind, Drive, To Sell as Human, and Win. His books have sold millions of copies, have been translated into 42 languages, and have won multiple awards. Daniel, we are so happy that you're here today. We have lots of questions, so let's get started talking to you. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you guys.
So, the power of regret, how looking backward moves us forward. This book, we were talking about it before we went live. Let's start right off with the fact that you put the word regret right in the title. I said I was going to talk to Daniel today about all my personal regrets and make this a really uncomfortable conversation for everyone, but I won't. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this book, how it came about, and mostly about, maybe start off talking about the World Regret Survey that you did.
Okay, so well, what I'm trying to do in this book is reclaim this emotion of regret, because I think we've gotten it profoundly wrong. We have this reigning philosophy of no regrets, the idea that we should always be positive, that we should never look backward. And that is a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. Well, it's a bad idea philosophically, but it's not only philosophically, it's a bad idea. It's a completely unscientific idea. What 50 years of research tells us is that everybody has regrets. Everybody has regrets. The only people without regrets are 5-year-olds, people with brain damage, and sociopaths. The rest of us have regret. And the thing is regret is unpleasant. So the question is, if why are all of us experiencing unpleasantness when we know that we're programmed to seek pleasure rather than pain? There must be some larger purpose behind this emotion of regret. And that larger purpose is that it's useful. It helps us. It clarifies. It instructs. The problem is we've been fed a bill of goods that we should never have regrets. We should never look backward. And what we should, the real answer here is not to ignore our regrets and not to wallow in our regrets, but to think about them. And when we do that, there are an array of benefits.
I agree. I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting that this book came out at a moment that it did, when there's this whole cancel culture out there that kind of doesn't allow people to have regrets anymore. I mean, it's kind of like we've kind of lost the ability, and you're right, a lot of people don't want to admit they have regrets, and some people, I don't want to jump around too much, but some people, instead of just admitting, yes, I regret something, they never learn from it. So as much as this book, when I first read it, I thought, oh no, is this going to make me feel worse about all the regrets I have, or is it going to make you want to move forward? And it really does make you want to look forward. And I think the way you scientifically kind of break down the different kinds of regret, or the way you the regret reclaimed, the regret revealed, and the regret remade. Maybe you could just talk about those steps and how that actually does move you forward.
Sure. No, library people can totally tolerate a discussion about the structure of books because I'll show you my view as a writer is I'm obsessed with structure when it comes to books, particularly certain kinds of nonfiction books, because my books are nonfiction, obviously, but they're not narrative nonfiction. It's not history. It's not a story that begins at the beginning and ends at the end. It's a book that is about an idea, and for those kinds of books in particular, I think that structure is enormously important. I seriously am slightly obsessed with structure, and so this book has a very distinct structure, Kelly, that you mentioned. So the first part is regret reclaimed, where I'm basically trying to make the case that as I was saying earlier, that we've gotten it wrong. And the two big ideas there is that regret makes us human, everybody has it, and regret makes us better. That if we reckon with it properly, there's a pile of evidence showing that it can help us make better decisions, it can help us be better strategists, it can help us become better negotiators, it can help us become better parents, it can help us become better problem solvers, it can help us find more meaning in our life. So I want to try to reclaim this profoundly misunderstood emotion. The second part is called regret revealed. And here, to answer one of your earlier questions, I wanted to understand, what do people regret? What do people regret? And when and to answer that question, I did multiple pieces of research, but the one that you mentioned is something called the World Regret Survey, where in the hope of gathering a few hundred regrets that I could end up writing about and maybe interviewing people, I put up this thing called the World Regret Survey. Before I knew it, we had 15,000 regrets from over 100 countries. Just a crazy, really glorious, incredible collection of regrets. And what I discovered there is that, and we can come back to this, is that around the world, people kept expressing the same 4 regrets over and over and over and over again. And they weren't really about the domains of their life, a career regret, a health regret, a romance regret. They were about something more interesting going on one layer beneath that, kind of a hidden sort of architecture of motivation and aspiration beneath those regrets. So around, really with sort of uncanny predictability, the same 4 regrets kept coming up over and over again. And then finally, part 3 is called regret remade, which is about what does science tell us about how to not get hobbled by your regrets, but to enlist them as a force for moving forward. And what's frustrating to me is that no one ever teaches us how to deal with negative emotions. And so we're fed this message that we have to be relentlessly positive all the time, and that when we're not positive, there's something wrong with us or that it's debilitating. So some of us ignore it, some of us wallow in it, others of us, medicalize it. And when in fact, if we actually just confront some of our negative emotions in a systematic way, we can turn them into forces for progress. So reclaimed, revealed, remade. That took me like 18 months to figure that out, but it was worth it.
You know what? You're right. Talking to a panel of librarians here, they are going to love the structure of this book because it really does, literally, the book moves you forward. Like you kind of understand where your regret's coming from, what to do about it, and then how to move out of it. And it's really wonderful. But I kept thinking that the World Regret Survey could have been a title of a novel of like a bad dating life or something. I just love that so much.
Yeah, that's funny. That's actually not a bad title for fiction.
But it's not fiction. So I love it. Was there any and I will say that this book is I literally laughed out loud so many times, and then I found myself crying a lot, which I'm sure you probably felt the same way when you were going through all the stories that people were telling you.
Yeah. There's some very moving stories there, and I think what's interesting about it, and at a broader level, Kelly, is we're at this point we have 17. We'll probably hit 18,000 this week in the number of regrets that we have. So you have 18,000 people sharing their regrets with a complete stranger. I think people might want to talk about this. Yeah. I think that the idea that we put this taboo on regret, oh my God, don't talk about it, don't admit it, is so profoundly unhealthy. And the willingness of people to disclose, to talk about it, to try to make sense of it, is, I think, really is telling us something. And the survey is still up there. It's worldregretsurvey.com. And assuming that our back end code is working today, you can even go onto there's a map on the worldregretsurvey.com that you can look at and say, what are the last 8 regrets submitted by people in Louisiana? What are the last 8 regrets submitted by people in Switzerland? And you can read through people's regrets. So, but again, what I'm trying, this word reclaim is actually really important, because I think that the concept of regret has been captured by enemy forces, and we need to reclaim it for the good side.
It's so true. And I will say I will admit that sprinkled throughout the book, for people that haven't seen the book yet, are like stories from people that say, like, how male 35 Texas and what his biggest regret was, or one of his regrets were. And you partly read it thinking, oh, like kind of almost comparing your own regret against somebody else's regret. And then you're like, okay, this isn't useful. But it's interesting. So 2 more things I would like to talk about is or at least is so what the closed door regret, if you could talk about that for a minute, to talk about something that was a little hard in the book. Can you explain what that is, and how did you find that was the hardest one to get people to see the positive part of?
That's an interesting question. So closed door regret is, I'll give you the story that I think exemplifies that. So there's a woman named Amy. She lives in Pasadena. She's in her 40s, and she had a childhood friend who she was very close to when she was younger. They stayed in contact as young women, but not as close as they were when they were kids. At one point, Amy heard that her friend had this pretty aggressive form of cancer. And she said, "Oh, wow, it's like my childhood friend has this aggressive form of cancer. I still care about her. I should reach out to her." And Amy wanted to reach out, and she didn't reach out. And she wanted to reach out, and she didn't reach out. And she waited and waited and waited. And then, sadly, when she did reach out, she called, and it turned out that the friend had passed away that morning. So this is a devastating thing. And you can't do anything about that regret, right? Like, that door has closed. And that's very difficult for people to deal with. Now, what do you do in that situation? In certain kinds of regrets that we have, let's say we've mistreated somebody, we can make amends. We can apologize. I've got more people than you would actually ever want to hear from, who have tattoos that say no regrets. But I also got a guy who had his no regrets tattoo removed. And so, but some kinds of regrets, you can't, there's nothing more she can do about that. And so it's going to hurt. Now, the question is, what do you do with that hurt? And for her, she said, okay, this stinks. I can't do anything about this, but the pain that I'm feeling here is telling me something. It's a signal. It's information. It's a lesson. And so what she did, Amy, is that sadly, she had another friend subsequently who had a terrible illness. And this friend, she called, she texted, she visited, she kept in touch with. And that friend also sadly died. But Amy kept in touch, and she didn't have regrets about that. So it's really a case of when you feel that spear, that's a terrible thing to happen to a person. You feel that spear. What do you do with it? You can't blithely say, "Oh, no regrets. Always look forward. Nothing I can do about it. The door is closed." But you can't say, "Oh my God, I'm the worst person in the world. I did this terrible thing, or I made this terrible mistake, and there's nothing I can do about it because the door is closed." What you have to do is, it's really at a meta level. It's, what do we do with negative? What are negative feelings for? They're not for ignoring. They're not for wallowing. They're for thinking. And so Amy properly, astutely, in a well-adjusted way said, "God, I feel terrible. But that terrible feeling is telling me something. It's a signal. What am I going to do with that signal?" And what she said is that signal is clarifying for me what's important, connecting with other people, and it's instructing me what to do when I'm in this situation again. Reach out.
Yeah, it's exactly true. And I think the survey itself, where there's tens of thousands and adding every day regrets, it gives people a reminder, okay, it's not just me. I'm not the only one that's made mistakes. Everybody, it's nice to know sometimes that, okay, I'm not the only one. You talk about that in the book, how talking about it with a friend, getting it out is actually a really important step in moving forward, just actually talking about it.
It's a very, very good point. So one of the things, one of the ways that we deal with it is in part to um, normalize it. And so the way I like to think about reckoning with these regrets is sort of inward, outward, forward. So inward is how do you view yourself in this regret? And I was very taken by the research. It's 20 years old now. It's been going on for 20 years, called in something called self-compassion. And with self-compassion, instead of lacerating yourself or like sort of in a very vacuous way boosting your self-esteem, you treat yourself with kindness rather than contempt. The way we talk to ourselves is often so cruel, so mean-spirited, so vicious. We would never talk to anybody else that way. And so we treat ourselves with kindness rather than contempt, but we also recognize that our mistakes are part of the human condition. I'll give you an example from my own life. I have some regrets, for a long time about not being kinder when I was younger. And I suddenly get all these thousands of regrets coming in, and I think, wow, I am totally not that special. There are a lot of people who have these kinds of regrets. And so that's the first step in doing it. And as you mentioned, Kelly, disclosure is really important. Disclosure is important. Outward disclosure is helpful. But even just writing about our regrets privately for 15 minutes a day for 3 consecutive days, that is a very useful exercise. And the reason is this. It's something, again, that librarians and writers can understand. Negative emotions in general are abstract and amorphous and blobby. When we take a negative emotion, which feels menacing because of its abstractness, because of its lack of form, when we write about it, we convert that blobbiness into concrete words, which are less fearsome. And that begins the sense-making process there. And so there's some very interesting work showing that when you write about negative emotions, you can defang them, and that's a great thing to do, but you shouldn't write about your positive experiences. That when you write about your positive experience, you kind of drain some of the positiveness out of it. So if you're having positive experiences, don't try to explain it. Don't try to make sense of it. Just enjoy it. But with negative emotions, that conversion process from blobbiness to concreteness can make it less menacing. And these steps, and then we want to extract a lesson from it. And the way you extract a lesson from it is to take some distance from it. Even things like asking yourself, what would you tell your best friend to do in response to this regret? And so it's a very, very simple process to reckon with these negative emotions. The problem is that we don't teach ourselves. Nobody teaches us. And so what really bugs me is the number of young people in their teens and college age who are completely hobbled by their negative emotions because no one ever taught them how to deal with it.
Yeah, I love it. And especially as a parent, you're always trying to teach your kids, like, don't worry about it. Next time you'll do better or whatever. But it really is an important moment in your life when you can point out to somebody, okay, it's okay to have a regret. I think this book is empowering for this reason. I know you have to go soon. I'm going to ask you one more quick question, but I just want to say that it makes it where you literally does. Trust me, when you read this book, you're going to feel this way. It moves you through it. And I think it's a very important. And I can't believe there wasn't another book that jumped right out at me that was about regrets. I think it's so smart that you wrote about this. And especially right now, this is my last quick question for you. During COVID, do you feel that people had more time to not only reflect on their regrets? Do you think they have more regrets? You have that one sad regret in there about a man whose wife of 62 years, he wishes that he would have kissed her more before she died of COVID. It was like heartbreaking. But do you think that COVID has brought out an awareness of people that they can admit this, or how do you think COVID has affected that? I know it's just been on everybody's minds.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that it has made people more reflective because we've been forced into reflection. We've had the brakes of our life have been sort of pressed and slowed down, and inevitably we are reflecting more. What's more is that I actually think, this is my own pet theory, is that I think the fact that people are I think that the fact that human beings are conscious of their mortality shapes a lot of what we do. And I think it shapes some of these regrets about boldness, where people like, oh my God, if only I'd taken the chance because I don't want to waste my shot here. And I think that the pandemic has obviously raised the salience of mortality, which gets people reflecting and wanting to step up. I think that's part of what's fueling the Great Resignation. So I think it played a role. You know what? I want to actually ask a question that came up in the chat. Somebody mentioned something about a gratitude journal in terms of writing about positive experiences, and I think the gratitude journals are a little bit different. When we write about I'm talking about writing about positive experiences. So if you say something like, let me try to explain why I enjoyed having dinner with my family last night. That actually drains some of the positivity of it. If you simply say, I'm so grateful that I have this great, if you write in a gratitude journal, I'm so grateful that I have this family and that I'm around and healthy to talk to them and love them, that's perfectly healthy. It's when it gets to the sense making process, rather than, because I think that sort of expressing gratitude for something, expressing gratitude for a set of conditions is very helpful. Trying to explain like why something is positive actually does drain it. Trying to explain why something is negative defangs it. And so it's a really smart question, whoever asked that in the chat. But I do think that there is some kind of difference there. And I think more broadly on this other point is that, we should just be in general talking about our regrets. And we've just gotten it so wrong, Kelly. We think that when we disclose our mistakes and our vulnerabilities, people will like us less. No, they like us more.
I really agree. It's really, really smart. It really is.
Yeah, and people do want to talk about this. I think the really interesting question, sort of related to Victor's earlier presentation, is, we're still having some trouble dealing with regrets writ large, sort of national regrets, cultural regrets, and things like that. I mean, I was really taken with his example of the jar of soil from Lynch. But I think that is a way at a national level to reckon with tragic mistakes and deep regrets. And we're sort of fighting that battle nationally, where you have sort of a philosophy that says, no, we never look back on America. We always are positive. We always are pointing forward. And I think if it's unhealthy at an individual level, it's also unhealthy at a national level. So maybe my hope is in this book is that it sparks some kind of conversation about how we can all live better and live better together.
If a book ever would spark a conversation, it's this one, and I completely agree. And on a national level, it makes me think of, I remember one time having an argument with one of my children, and at the end of the argument saying to him, you know what, I was wrong. And he didn't even know what to say. He goes, did you just admit you were wrong? And I said, yeah. And it literally just changed the whole thing. So sometimes, like you said, sometimes you think you're giving up power, but really it's just making you more human. And I think this book is perfect for book clubs. I think this book is perfect for families to read together, for friends. It's really, I'm not kidding. I absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Kelly. And we are, to Dawn's question in the chat, we are working on, it's literally on my desktop right now. We're working on a discussion guide for
great. Perfect.
for this book. And and again, anyway, so and can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
Just one thing about, can I just say, I do have to go, but I like talking to you guys. So I would not be a writer if it weren't for libraries, period. All right. And the reason for that is this. So I grew up in Central Ohio. And as some of you might know, Central Ohio, in particular, Ohio in general, has a very good library system, in part because of the way the state finances libraries. The local jurisdictions are not always going cup in hand to local taxpayers to fund the library. There's some state funding of libraries. And so I lived walking distance from a public library. And my mother, who was a reader, would pile her kids in the back of the Chevy Impala and drive us down to downtown Columbus and dump us out of the car and just get rid of us and say, listen, I'll see you guys at 3. And so as little kids, I would I would just wander around this giant cavernous library on Grant Avenue in Columbus, Ohio. And that's, if I had grown up somewhere else without a robust public library system, I don't think I would have been a writer. So thank you, librarians.
Well, I don't think you could have ended any better. That's wonderful to hear. And Thank you. I think this book is going to change a lot of people's lives and it's going to heal a lot of relationships. So we could not be happier that you joined us today. Thank you so much, Daniel.
What a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Sure. If you didn't have to leave, we'd be here for longer, much longer.
Thanks, you
Take
guys.
care. So thank you everybody for listening to that wonderful presentation. I know that for a fact that this book will get all of your readers talking. It really is a wonderful book for book clubs and for people to read on their own. And so that was really fun. And if he didn't have to leave, we could have asked him 1,000 more questions. So I'm sorry that we didn't have that much time. But wasn't that great, Miriam? You might be muted still. Are you? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And Anne Benton in the chat mentioned the Edith Piaf story, which is mentioned
Oh,
a couple of times. Really, it opens with that, and it's really incredible.
yes, that was so touching in itself, and it's true. Like if you're, if you're on your deathbed that young for very obvious reasons, and you still are saying you have no regrets, like, are you sure you don't have any? And I think there's a lot of great life lessons to be learned and a lot of like healing if you can just admit it. Um, there was so many regrets of people that said that they should have studied harder in college. And probably that should be one of my regrets, but that's probably one of my only not regrets. But it was really great. And honestly, just when you feel like you're gonna like cry too much, you start laughing, and then it's just very human. The whole book just makes you feel very connected to people. It really was wonderful. So we have a few more titles just to highlight for you, and then we will be finished. So Miriam, do you want to talk about these titles?
Sure. We like you are celebrating Black History Month, and we have a breadth of new books that are coming out and also newly released, including Lift Every Voice, some novels here, as well as biographies.
Miriam, before I go to the next slide, I will say that while we were talking to Victor before we were live, we were talking about wanting to do programming at that beautiful library, and we were trying to already think of which authors we could finagle to go there so we could go visit him in person. That library is stunning.
It
So
is. It's amazing.
yes, but we will, again, like I said, there's the tiny URL on the screen, but we will be sending all of these titles in the wrap up as well. And then another slide for further reading for psychology and personal growth. We have a couple of really great titles that just came out. Other than The Power of Regret, there's the new Brene Brown, the Susan Cain. And so we just hope that you will check these out as well. Thank you for joining us for our second year of the Library Lunch and Learn. It's always so wonderful. I feel like we learn something, we enjoy ourselves, and we get to spend time with all of you. So thank you again for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Miriam. Have a great day, everybody. Our next episode is going to be April 14th. The link will be in the wrap-up report so you can sign up. Have a wonderful day.
Take care, everyone.